Each Jurassic Park film has had to overcome the same narrative hurdle. How do you get man and dinosaurs yet again in the same geographical location so that much gaping in wonder followed by screaming and running can ensue? And of course, up to this point, that has been made all the more difficult because those dinosaurs, for the most part, have been confined to remote islands. And while having watertight logic has never been a necessary criterion for my enjoyment of these films, nonetheless, finding fresh and at least relatively believable ways for man and dinosaurs to collide does indeed help to suspend my disbelief and consequently add to my engagement in the story. So when I found out that this film wasn't going to be about escaping a failed amusement park or even going on a rescue mission to save some humans, but rather go on a rescue mission to save the dinosaurs, I was intrigued. Though, of course, that was kind of the plot of The Lost World, and come to think of it, there were a lot of elements in this second Jurassic World film that just copied the second Jurassic Park film. Regardless, though discussed a few other times in Jurassic films, the series has never really done a deep dive into the moral and philosophical implications of bringing back an extinct species, and ultimately what kind of responsibility we, those creatures' sub-creators, would have to them. So by creating a scenario in this film where those dinosaurs are threatened by a huge erupting volcano, the characters themselves are finally forced to ask, do we let our creation once again go extinct, releasing them from our control, or do we take responsibility? Do we fight to keep them alive? Interesting stuff, right? Right? At least on an idea level, and I will say one of the human-animal relationships that did work quite well, even beyond just that idea level, was the relationship between Owen and his Velociraptor Blue. Though it ultimately was rather underutilized, there still was a dynamic there that when it was explored didn't just feel fresh, but also sincere, alive, and personal in a way that helped to flesh out this film's central thematic concepts. I was also quite impressed with a lot of this film's direction. I could just tell that J.A. Bayona really had a lot of fun infusing this Jurassic film with a slightly different style and tone, one that quite often felt much closer to a monster film than anything we'd seen previously. Just the way that he would light certain sets or play out particular gags, a lot of it just felt straight out of a horror film. And speaking of newer avenues, again, I thought it was at least interesting on a conceptual level to halfway through this film move it into this gothic mansion. It just all the more added to that feeling of this being a real horror film. I also found myself enjoying a few of the newer characters that found themselves being terrorized in that haunted mansion of sorts. I thought Justice Smith in particular was really fun, just constantly bringing a lot of enjoyable levity, even in an underwritten part. Besides those previously discussed elements, though, there really wasn't a whole lot that I enjoyed about this film, a lot of which just came down to the writing. To go back to those really interesting philosophical and moral ideas for a second, this film's writers, Connolly and Colin Trevorrow, just proved time and again that they really had no idea what they wanted to say with them. It actually felt like they'd only watched the first Jurassic Park once, vaguely remembered the bullet points of Dr. Malcolm's point of view, and then tried to construct an entire film around that. It always felt underbaked and even more poorly understood. And I harp on this now because this entire film really did hinge on those philosophical and moral dilemmas. And some really, really tough and important decisions were made by certain characters because they fell on one side of that argument. And if we, the audience, were not only unable to understand those decisions, but unable to empathize with those that made them, this entire film would come crashing down. Not only that, but the writers were so rarely able to give the characters discernible objectives, especially in the second half of the film. In so many sequences, I didn't really know where they were trying to get or even what they were trying to accomplish when they got there. Even an objective as simple as survival or just get out felt muddied and unclear. Where were they trying to escape to, and to what end were they trying to escape? And instead of communicating the answers to those very foundational questions, the writers would just have the characters move from one location to another where they would just endure some more familiar Jurassic horrors. And though I will absolutely stand by my statement that J.A. Bayona did a solid job directing this film, he too seemed like someone that had seen Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park and Lost World once, and off memory tried to recreate a number of that film's iconic sequences, each time, though, missing some very important elements from them. There were a number of scenes and beats and camera angles that were nearly carbon copied from those original films, but each time missing some very essential ingredients. Bayona might have successfully gotten the first half of a Spielberg gag into this film, like a young girl being stuck in some sort of small compartment desperately trying to pull down a protective door, but then would miss the second, even more important beat, like the twist that the charging raptor had only seen a reflection of the girl. This film also completely wasted the talents of Bryce Dallas Howard and Chris Pratt. If you can believe it, they were even more thinly written in this film than they were in the first Jurassic World. Though they did still share some chemistry, their relationship was so boring, and there wasn't even the slightest attempt at a character arc for either of them. And to make matters worse, for 90% of the film, they were just reactive characters versus proactive, responding to the plot instead of driving it. I will say too, Chris Pratt especially just continued to feel handcuffed in this part, really unable to unleash his much more natural, goofy, and insecure qualities to endear us to his character. He instead was asked to again play this rather dull man's man with a lot of swagger and macho confidence, which is a fine character, but just not Chris Pratt. In the end, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom wasn't some abomination. It was full of solid to impressive direction, a few cool action sequences, a fun relationship between a man and his pet velociraptor, and a few fresh locales for a Jurassic film. But ultimately, it was all so thinly held together in the writing. The central conflict, the themes, and the characters so horribly uncompelling and dull. And for all these reasons, I will give the film a 2.5 out of 5. I would still love to know what you guys thought of the film though, so definitely comment below and let me know. And also, if you could you rank for me all the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World films? I'd be very curious to see where this one falls in that lineup. Finally, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.